It was one of those warm afternoons that made the whole neighborhood seem peaceful. The sun was bright but soft, and the trees along the street swayed gently with the wind. People were cutting their lawns, kids were riding bikes, and music floated from a house nearby. The kind of day when everything feels ordinary, steady, and safe. A 17-year-old boy named Malik Johnson was walking home from basketball practice. His backpack was slung over one shoulder, and he had his earphones in, listening to a playlist that always helped him unwind after a long day. His sneakers scuffed the pavement as he bounced a half-flat basketball with one hand. He wasn't thinking about much, just the usual teenage stuff. Homework, finals, maybe texting a friend later to talk about the weekend game. Malik was a good kid. Quiet at school, respectful, the kind of person who stayed out of trouble. He had dreams of going to college, maybe studying computer science, though he hadn't told anyone yet. His mom, Angela, always told him that he could be anything he wanted if he worked hard and stayed focused. He believed her. After all, she worked for the government, though she didn't talk much about what she did exactly. He only knew she wore a badge and that people respected her when she walked into a room. He turned the corner toward the small convenience store that sat near the park. The bell over the door jingled when he walked in, and cool air wrapped around him. The man behind the counter looked up and smiled. Malik came here often after school, so the owner knew him. "Hey, Malik," the man said. "How was practice?" "Hot," Malik said with a laugh, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Coach made us run drills for an hour." "That's how you get better, right?" "Yeah, I guess so." He grabbed a bottle of water and a bag of chips, then waited at the counter while a little girl tried to count out her coins for a candy bar. He helped her when she got stuck on the math, and she smiled shyly at him before leaving with her treat. "Good kid," the owner said quietly. "Your mom raised you right." Malik just nodded, smiled, and paid for his stuff. He stepped outside, twisting the cap off his water bottle. The air felt warmer now, heavy with that summer kind of stillness that comes before the evening. Cars rolled by lazily, music thumping from one of them. He started walking again, heading toward the park. His neighborhood wasn't fancy, but it was nice. Quiet, with neat lawns and friendly people. He liked it that way. As he crossed the park, a police car turned slowly onto the street behind him. Malik noticed the reflection of the lights in a window but didn't think much of it. Cops drove through the neighborhood all the time. It was just part of life. Still, for reasons he couldn't explain, he felt a small twist in his stomach. Maybe it was nothing, he told himself. He turned up his music and kept walking. A few blocks later, he glanced back again. The police car was still behind him. Not close, just slowly rolling down the same street. Malik tried not to stare. He had seen enough news to know that you didn't want to make any sudden moves. He took a deep breath and kept his eyes forward, focusing on the rhythm of his steps. His mind drifted back to the night before, when his mom had talked to him about safety. It was one of those conversations that always made him uncomfortable. She told him again that if he was ever stopped by the police, he needed to stay calm. Keep his hands visible. Speak politely. Don't argue. He had rolled his eyes at the time. "Mom, it's fine," he'd said. "That's not going to happen to me." But now, as he walked with the sun dipping lower in the sky and the soft rumble of tires behind him, he couldn't shake that uneasy feeling. He reached the intersection near his street. Normally, he'd turn left there and walk the last 2 blocks home. He could almost see the house in his mind, his mom's car in the driveway, the porch light that always turned on before dark. He smiled faintly, thinking about dinner. She was probably making something healthy again, like baked chicken and vegetables. He was about to cross the street when he heard the sound of a car door opening behind him, then another. His heartbeat picked up. He didn't want to turn around, but curiosity, and something deeper like instinct, made him glance over his shoulder. 2 police officers were stepping out of the cruiser. One was tall and heavy-set, with his hand resting casually on his belt. The other looked younger, maybe in his 30s. They were talking to each other quietly, but their eyes were locked on Malik. For a split second, he froze. His mom's voice echoed in his head. "Stay calm." Hands visible, he turned down his music, pulled one earbud out, and waited. "Hey, you there," the taller officer called. His tone wasn't rude exactly, but it wasn't friendly either. "Can we talk to you for a second?" Malik swallowed hard and nodded. Sure, sir," he said softly. The younger officer stepped closer. "What are you doing around here?" "Just walking home from practice," Malik replied. He held up his basketball and pointed toward the park. "I live right down the street." The officers exchanged a quick look. Mind showing us some ID? The older one asked. Malik reached slowly into his pocket for his wallet. It's in here, he said, making sure they could see his hands. He handed them his school ID card. As the officer looked it over, Malik tried to keep his breathing steady. A few cars passed, slowing slightly as drivers glanced at the scene. A couple walking their dog stopped on the opposite sidewalk. Watching quietly, Malik could feel every eye on him even though he had done nothing wrong. Where'd you say you were coming from? The officer asked again. The gym. Over on Maple Street. Uh-huh. You been anywhere else today? No, sir. Just school then practice. The younger officer looked around the street as if searching for something. You live around here? Yes, sir. Right there, Malik said, pointing toward the houses down the block. My mom's home. There was another long pause. Malik felt sweat gathering on his palms, though it wasn't from the heat anymore. He wished his mom would somehow just appear, like she always seemed to when he was younger and scared. The older officer handed back his ID. We've had some reports about someone matching your description, he said. We're just checking things out. Malik nodded slowly. Okay, he said, even though inside he wanted to ask what description. What did I do? But he stayed quiet. His mom always told him words could be twisted and silence was sometimes safer. After a moment, the officer stepped back. All right, the taller one said, glancing at his partner. You can go ahead. Malik nodded again and started walking away, his heart still pounding. He didn't look back this time. He just wanted to get home. He turned the corner and exhaled shakily, trying to calm down. He didn't know whether to be angry or relieved. He hadn't been touched or yelled at, but something about the way they looked at him, like they were waiting for him to do something wrong, made his chest feel heavy. By the time he reached his front door, the sun had dipped low, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. He could smell dinner cooking inside. That smell, warm and familiar, grounded him. He took a deep breath before stepping inside. His mom's voice floated from the kitchen. Malik, that you? Yeah, he called back, kicking off his shoes. Practice ran long. She appeared in the doorway, smiling, still wearing her work clothes, a neat blouse and slacks, her ID badge hanging from her belt. You hungry? Starving, he said, forcing a small smile. She studied him for a moment, like she always did when she sensed something was off. You okay? Yeah, he lied. Just tired. She nodded, but her eyes lingered on him a moment longer. Go wash up. Dinner's almost ready. He went to his room, dropped his bag on the floor, and sat on the edge of his bed. For a minute, he just stared at his hands. They were trembling a little. He thought about the officers, the way they had looked at him, the way his stomach had tightened when they spoke. He reached for his phone and texted his best friend. Bro, something weird just happened. Then he stopped typing. What was the point? Nothing actually happened, right? They hadn't hurt him. They hadn't even yelled. It was just a stop, a misunderstanding. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that it could have gone differently. That maybe, if he had said the wrong thing or moved too quickly, it could have been worse. He turned off his phone and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. His mom's words echoed again. If it ever happens, stay calm. He wondered why she had said if like it was inevitable. Outside, the sound of a car engine rolled down the street. For a moment, Malik froze again, listening, but it kept going, fading into the distance. He exhaled slowly and tried to let it go, but deep down something in him had changed. He didn't know what yet, but that small uneasy moment on the street would stay with him longer than he could imagine. The next morning started like any other day. The sunlight slipped through the blinds in Malik's room, painting thin lines across his wall. His alarm buzzed softly and he turned it off with a sleepy hand. For a few seconds he just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to shake off the strange heaviness that had followed him since yesterday. The memory of those police officers still lingered in his mind like a shadow he couldn't quite forget. He told himself not to overthink it. People made mistakes. Maybe they really thought he looked like someone else. That's all it was, he decided. He got out of bed, stretched, and went to wash up. The smell of breakfast drifted from the kitchen, scrambled eggs and toast, the usual. His mom was already dressed for work, a navy jacket neatly pressed, her ID badge clipped at her belt. She always looked sharp, professional. But to Malik, she was just mom. Morning. she said with a smile when he walked in. "You sleep okay?" "Yeah," he said, sitting down at the table. "Just tired." She poured him a glass of orange juice and gave him a look that told him she wasn't convinced. "You sure everything's fine? You were pretty quiet last night." Malik hesitated. He wanted to tell her what had happened. The stop, the questions, the uneasy feeling, but something held him back. Maybe it was pride, or maybe he just didn't want to make her worry. She already carried enough on her shoulders. "Yeah, I'm good," he said finally. "Just thinking about school." She nodded slowly. "All right. You know you can tell me anything, right?" "I know," he said, managing a small smile. When he left the house, the air was cool and bright. It felt like a normal morning again. He walked to school, earbuds in, nodding along to the beat. He met a few friends at the gate, laughing and joking like always. For a while, everything felt easy again, but deep down he couldn't help glancing at every passing police car. It was almost like his body remembered what his mind was trying to forget. At lunch, his best friend asked him why he looked distracted. Malik just shrugged. "Nothing," he said. "Just tired." He didn't want to sound paranoid. He wanted to believe it had been nothing more than a weird mistake. That afternoon, he stayed late after school to finish a project. When he finally headed home, the sun was already starting to dip behind the trees. He took the same route as always, cutting through the park, past the small grocery store. He waved at the owner, who waved back. Everything looked normal. But just before he reached the end of the block, he noticed something. 2 police cars parked near the corner. The same kind of cars as yesterday. He slowed down slightly, pretending to check his phone, hoping they wouldn't notice him. One of the officers was leaning against the car, talking to someone. Another stood near the sidewalk, scanning the area. Malik's chest tightened. He told himself again not to be nervous. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He kept walking. But the moment he passed, he heard a voice call out behind him. "Hey, you!" Stop for a second, he froze. The sound of his mom's voice echoed in his mind again. "Stay calm, keep your hands visible." He turned slowly. 2 officers were walking toward him. He didn't recognize them, but their expressions made him uneasy. "Where you headed?" one of them asked. "Home," Malik said, trying to sound steady. "Mind telling us your name?" The officer continued he did. Then the other officer asked for his ID. Malik handed it over carefully, his hands trembling just a little. As they looked it over, the first officer asked, "You sure you're not skipping school or something?" "No, sir. School just ended," Malik replied. One of them looked toward the park. "There's been some reports of kids hanging around here causing trouble." "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Malik shook his head. "No, sir." The officers exchanged glances. Malik could feel the tension rising in his chest. He looked around and saw a few people on the sidewalk watching, but no one said a word. Then, to his surprise, one of the officers asked, "Didn't we talk to you yesterday?" Malik blinked. "Maybe," he said carefully. "2 officers stopped me, but they said I could go." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really? What was that about?" "I don't know," Malik said softly. "They said I looked like someone else." The second officer sighed, then spoke in a tone that was half friendly, half skeptical. "Well, just so you know, when people hang around certain areas, they can attract attention. Not saying you did anything wrong, but we gotta check things out." Malik nodded, keeping his gaze down. "I understand, sir. Where's home?" the first officer asked again. "Just down there," Malik said, pointing to his street. "Okay," the officer said finally. "Go ahead. Just stay out of trouble." "Thank you," Malik said quickly, taking his ID back. He started walking again, his legs a little unsteady. When he turned the corner, he exhaled deeply, trying to calm his racing heart. He didn't understand why this kept happening. He wasn't a bad kid. He had good grades. He helped his mom. He played sports. But somehow he still looked like someone else. When he reached home, his mom was already there. She looked up from her laptop when he walked in. "You're home late again," she said. "Yeah, stayed after school. You sure that's all?" She asked, studying him. "You look pale." He hesitated again. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then finally he sighed. "Mom, something weird happened again today." She put her laptop aside and gave him her full attention. "What do you mean again?" He told her everything. The stop yesterday, the questions today, how they said he matched some description. He tried to sound calm, but his voice shook a little near the end. Angela listened without interrupting. Her face stayed still, but her eyes darkened slightly. They stopped you twice? He nodded. Did they touch you? No, they just asked questions. She leaned back in her chair, thinking. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then she stood and went to the counter, where her phone was charging. You did the right thing, she said quietly. You stayed calm. I'm proud of you. Malik watched her carefully. Mom, are you mad? Not at you, she said, just at how things work sometimes. He didn't understand what she meant, but the seriousness in her voice made his stomach twist. It's fine, he said quickly. I'm okay. She looked at him, and a small smile tugged at her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. You're okay now, she said softly. That night, Malik couldn't sleep. He kept replaying everything in his head. The looks, the questions, the way the officers had stood close enough to make him nervous. He didn't know why it bothered him so much, but it did. He felt like he was walking around with a target on his back that he hadn't earned. His phone buzzed. A text from his friend popped up. You good, bro? Heard some cops been around the park again. Malik stared at it for a long time before replying, Yeah, I'm fine. But he wasn't. Something had changed inside him. A small shift that made the world feel different. Not dangerous exactly, but unpredictable. Like anything could happen for no reason at all. The next morning, his mom left early for work. She kissed him on the forehead before she left, and for a second, he almost told her not to worry, but the words stuck in his throat. As she drove away, Malik stood by the window and watched her car disappear around the corner. He didn't know what she was thinking, but if he had, he'd know she was already making plans. She wasn't just his mom. She was also someone who had the power to ask questions that other people couldn't ignore. And if anyone was going to protect him, it would be her. The weekend came faster than Malik expected, but it didn't bring the comfort he hoped for. Even though he didn't have school, his mind refused to rest. He kept replaying the same scene over and over. The flashing lights, the questions, the sharp tone of the officers. It was like a song he couldn't turn off. Saturday morning, the sun was already bright when Malik came down for breakfast. His mom was sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in one hand, her phone in the other. She looked deep in thought. When he walked in, she quickly put the phone down and smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Morning, kiddo, she said. Sleep okay? Yeah, he mumbled, taking a seat. He poured himself some cereal, though he wasn't hungry. He could tell his mom had been thinking about what he told her earlier that week. The way she kept glancing at him, quiet but watchful, made that obvious. After a few minutes of silence, she finally spoke. You know, I've been doing some checking. He looked up. Checking what? About those officers who stopped you, she said. I called in a few favors. Malik frowned. Mom, you didn't have to do that. Oh yes, I did, she said calmly. You're my son. I needed to make sure nothing else was going to happen. He didn't argue. There was no point. His mom wasn't just protective, she was determined. She worked for the government, though Malik still didn't know everything she did. He knew she was part of something big, something serious. Whenever she talked about work, her voice carried a tone that made him sit up straighter. She looked at him again, softer this time. I just want you to be careful, Malik. If something like that happens again, call me. Right away. He nodded, still unsure how to respond. I will. The rest of the day passed quietly. Malik tried to focus on homework, played some video games, and even shot hoops in the driveway for a while. But that uneasy feeling wouldn't leave. He caught himself checking the street every time he heard a car. By Sunday, he thought maybe things were finally settling down. He and his mom went grocery shopping together. The day felt normal again. They laughed about the long line at the store, talked about his upcoming exams, and even stopped for ice cream on the way home. It almost felt like nothing had happened, but Monday proved that peace doesn't always last. It started as another regular morning. Malik grabbed his backpack, kissed his mom goodbye, and walked out the door. The air was cool, the sun soft behind a layer of clouds. He walked his usual route, earbuds in, mind half on a math test he had later that day. When he reached the corner by the park, he saw them again, 2 police cruisers parked side by side. His stomach sank. He told himself it was just coincidence. There were always patrols around. Still, he slowed his steps, unsure what to do. He thought about turning around, maybe taking the longer route, but that would look suspicious. He kept walking, his heart beating faster with every step. One of the officers looked up, noticed him, and nudged the other. The sound of a car door opening made Malik freeze. "Hey! Hold up!" He stopped, his throat tightening. He turned slowly, his hands instinctively coming out of his pockets. Two officers walked toward him. Different ones this time, but the same look in their eyes. Sharp, assessing, distant. "You live around here?" one of them asked. "Yes, sir," Malik said quietly. "Just down the street. What's your name?" "Malik." The officer nodded, glancing at his partner. "You been over at the park this morning?" "No, sir. Just walking to school." "Uh-huh." The second officer stepped a little closer. "Mind if we talk for a second?" Malik swallowed. "Sure." They started asking questions. Where he went to school, who he hung out with, if he knew about a group of kids that had been making noise around the park. He answered politely, keeping his voice calm, remembering every word his mom had told him. But before he could finish, the second officer stepped back, speaking into his radio. Malik couldn't hear what was being said, but he saw the change in their body language. Something had shifted. The older officer's hand moved closer to his belt. Malik's stomach dropped. He took a slow step back. "Sir, I didn't do anything. I'm just walking to school." "Relax," the officer said quickly, though his voice carried tension. "We just need to make sure everything checks out." Malik's phone buzzed in his pocket. He hesitated before pulling it out. "Can I call my mom?" he asked. "She's expecting me at school." "Put the phone down," the officer said. "We'll handle this." His heart raced now. He placed the phone back slowly. He could feel the weight of people watching again. Drivers slowing down, a woman walking her dog staring from across the street. He wished someone would say something, but everyone just stood there uncertain. The second officer finished his radio call and returned. "All right," he said. "We're going to verify your address. Just stay put." Malik nodded. He wanted to run, but he knew that would make things worse. He stood there quietly, his hands trembling slightly. Minutes felt like hours. Then suddenly a familiar voice called out from behind him. "Excuse me, what's going on here?" Malik turned and his breath caught. His mom's car had pulled up on the curb. Angela stepped out wearing her work jacket, her badge visible on her belt. Her eyes were sharp, focused, the same look she wore when she was in professional mode. The officers froze for a split second, clearly not expecting her. One of them stepped forward. "Ma'am, this is a police matter," Angela cut him off smoothly. "I can see that. That's my son you're questioning." Both officers exchanged looks. "Your son?" "Yes," she said, walking closer, her tone calm but firm. She pulled out her identification and flipped it open. "I'm Special Agent Angela Johnson, Federal Bureau of Investigation." The words seemed to hang in the air. The officers blinked, their posture changing instantly. The tension that had filled the space only seconds ago began to dissolve. "Ma'am, we didn't know," one of them started. "That's obvious," Angela said evenly. "Now why exactly are you stopping my son again?" The younger officer looked uncomfortable. There have been some complaints about someone matching his description. Angela's expression didn't change. "His description?" she repeated. "And what description is that exactly?" Neither officer answered right away. Malik stood quietly beside her, feeling both relief and disbelief. His mom's presence alone seemed to shift everything. Angela sighed softly and crossed her arms. "I want your names, badge numbers, and the reason for this stop," she said firmly. "I also want to know if your body cameras are on." The officers stammered a bit, assuring her they were. She nodded slowly. "Good. Then you won't mind if I request the footage later." The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, the older officer cleared his throat. "Apologies, ma'am. We were just following up on a call." "I'm sure you were," she said. "Now, unless my son has suddenly become a suspect for walking to school, I believe this conversation is over." The two officers exchanged uneasy looks. "Of course, ma'am," one said. "Sorry for the misunderstanding." Angela gave a polite but cold smile. "I'm sure you are." She turned to Malik. "Get in the car." He obeyed without a word. As they drove off, Malik looked out the window, watching the officers shrink in the rearview mirror. His mom didn't speak right away. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white against the black leather. After a minute, she said quietly, "This ends now." Malik turned to her. "Mom, it's okay." "I'm fine," she shook her head. "No, you're not. You shouldn't have to go through that." He wanted to argue, to tell her not to make it worse, but one look at her face told him it was no use. This wasn't just about him anymore, it was about something much bigger. They pulled into the driveway and Angela took a deep breath before turning off the engine. "I've seen this happen to too many people," she said softly. "But I never thought I'd see it happen to my own son." Malik stared down at his hands. "It's not your fault." "I know," she said. "But it's still my fight." That night, she made a few calls from her office. Her voice was calm but steady, the kind of voice that meant she was in full command. Malik listened from down the hall, hearing only pieces, words like report, documentation, follow-up. When she finally came to say goodnight, she looked tired but determined. "Get some rest," she said softly. "Tomorrow might be a long day." As Malik lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he realized something had changed. Not just for him, but for his mom too. Whatever happened next, it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning came with a gray sky and a heavy feeling that hung in the air like fog. Malik woke up to the sound of his mom moving around the kitchen, her phone pressed to her ear. He could tell by her tone that it wasn't a casual conversation. Her voice was calm but sharp, the kind she used when something serious was happening. He got dressed and came downstairs quietly. She was standing by the counter, papers spread out, laptop open, a coffee that had gone cold beside her. She ended the call just as he entered. "Morning," he said softly. She looked up, managing a small smile. "Morning, sweetheart. You okay?" "Yeah," he said, though he didn't really feel it. "You're working from home today?" "Not exactly," she said, gathering her papers into a folder. "I've got a meeting downtown. Something I need to handle." He didn't need to ask what. He already knew it had something to do with the officers who stopped him. He hesitated before speaking. "You're not in trouble, right?" Angela shook her head and smiled faintly. "No, baby. I don't get in trouble. I cause it for the right people." He chuckled a little, but deep down he worried. His mom was strong, no doubt about it, but he had seen enough to know how difficult it was to challenge people in power. After breakfast, she drove him to school instead of letting him walk. The ride was quiet at first, filled only with the hum of the engine and the soft buzz of the radio. Finally, she said, "I filed a formal complaint last night. The department will have to respond." Malik turned toward her. "What if they get mad?" "They can get mad," she said simply. "What matters is accountability. I'm not going to let this disappear." He nodded, though the word accountability sounded like something that didn't exist much in the real world. Still, he was grateful. He didn't say it out loud, but seeing her fight for him made him feel safer, even if it also scared him a little. When he got to school, whispers were already spreading. Someone had recorded part of what happened the day before. His mom stepping out of the car, the officers freezing when she flashed her badge. The clip had made its way onto social media overnight. Now people were watching it, talking about it, arguing over it. By lunchtime, Malik's phone was filled with messages. Some were supportive, others were cruel. That didn't surprise him. People always find something to say, he thought to himself. Still, it was strange to see his face all over the internet, in videos and comments being discussed by people who didn't even know him. When he got home that afternoon, his mom was already there. She looked tired but more focused than ever. "How was school?" she asked. He shrugged. "Weird, everyone saw the video." She sighed. "Yeah, I figured that might happen. It's spreading faster than I expected. Is that bad?" "Not necessarily," she said. "Sometimes the truth needs attention, but it also means things might get messy before they get better." That night, Angela sat at her desk writing emails, making calls, and reviewing documents. Malik watched from the living room, feeling both proud and worried. His mom wasn't just reacting, she was organizing something. She was building a case piece by piece. Later that evening, she got a call from someone important. He couldn't hear the whole conversation, but he caught words like internal review, media inquiry, and statement. When she hung up, she looked at him and smiled faintly. "They're listening," she said. "They don't like attention. Now they'll have to act." The next few days passed in a blur. News crews started appearing near their neighborhood. Reporters wanted interviews. Angela refused most of them, saying she wanted to focus on the process, not publicity. But still, people were talking, neighbors, teachers, even the local community leaders. It had become more than a story about Malik. It had become a story about fairness and trust. One evening, Malik sat on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was streaked with pink and orange, and for the first time in a while the world felt still. He heard footsteps and looked up to see his mom joining him, holding 2 mugs of tea. She handed him one. "I know it's been a lot," she said softly. "You didn't ask for any of this." He looked at her. "Neither did you." She smiled, her eyes soft. "That's true, but life doesn't always ask. It just happens. What matters is how we respond." They sat quietly for a moment, sipping tea, watching the sky fade to gray. Malik finally spoke. "Do you think things will actually change?" Angela looked thoughtful. "Change doesn't come easy, but sometimes it starts with small things like speaking up even when it's uncomfortable." "You did that, Malik. That matters." He didn't respond right away. He just nodded, taking in her words. He had never thought of himself as brave. He just wanted to get to school. But maybe somehow his small moment had turned into something bigger. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. A black SUV pulled up in front of their house. 2 men stepped out, dressed in suits. Malik's heart skipped a beat. But when his mom opened the door, she didn't look surprised. "Morning, gentlemen," she greeted. "I assume you're here from headquarters." They nodded. "Yes, ma'am. We wanted to speak with you in person." Malik stayed in the living room, pretending to do homework while listening to the low voices coming from the kitchen. He caught fragments, words like review, procedure, public relations, and commendation. When they finally left, his mom walked into the living room, setting her papers down. "What's going on?" he asked. She smiled slightly. "They're taking this seriously now." The video got the attention of more than just the local department. He raised his eyebrows. "Like the FBI?" "Higher," she said quietly. "People who can actually make things move." That evening, they had dinner together. For the first time in a long time, they laughed easily. Malik told her about a funny moment at school, and she listened without her phone nearby. It felt normal again, and he realized how much he had missed that. But peace didn't last long. 2 days later, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from the police department, an official notice requesting a meeting. Angela read it carefully, her face unreadable. Malik waited, nervous. "Well?" he asked. She folded the letter and set it down. "They want to talk," she said. "Probably about resolving this quietly." He frowned. "Are you going to?" Her eyes lifted to meet his. "No, quiet isn't good enough anymore." The following morning, they drove to the station. As they entered, Malik felt the weight of every eye on them. Reporters stood outside, cameras flashing. Angela walked tall, calm, and steady. Inside, they were escorted to a conference room. Across the table sat the police chief and 2 senior officers. "Agent Johnson," the chief said politely, "we appreciate you coming in." "I didn't have much choice," she replied, her tone professional. "You've asked for this meeting." They talked for nearly an hour. The chief expressed regret. The officers spoke carefully, and Angela listened without interrupting. Finally, she said, "Regret doesn't fix what happened. Accountability does." The room went silent. She handed over a folder. Inside were documents, statements, timestamps, witness accounts, and policy violations. She had done her homework. "I'm not here for revenge," she said. "I'm here for change. My son deserves to walk to school without fear. So does every other kid in this city." The chief nodded slowly. "We'll review these immediately. I can assure you, Agent Johnson, this will not be ignored." When they walked out of the building, Malik felt a strange mix of pride and relief. The cameras were still there, flashing, but this time he didn't look away. He realized his mom wasn't just his protector. She was a force. Later that evening, as they sat in the living room, the news came on. A reporter was speaking about new measures being proposed by the police department: bias training, community partnerships, and updated stop protocols. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Malik looked at his mom. "Did you do that?" She smiled gently. "We did that." He smiled back, feeling something he hadn't in a while: hope. As the night grew quiet, Malik went to his room and looked out the window. The street was calm, the lights glowing softly. For the first time in weeks, he didn't feel afraid to walk outside. He still remembered everything that had happened, but now it didn't feel like a scar. It felt like a start. Downstairs, Angela sat at her desk again, but this time she wasn't making calls. She was writing something, a letter maybe, or a report. She paused, glanced at a framed picture of Malik on her desk, and smiled. Then she whispered softly to herself, This is only the beginning. The days that followed were quiet, but not in an empty way. It was the kind of quiet that comes after a storm, when the air still feels heavy, but you can finally breathe again. Malik was back to his routine, going to school, doing homework, and helping around the house. But something had changed in him. He walked differently now, his shoulders a little straighter, his eyes a little stronger. At school, people still talked about what had happened, but not as much as before. The internet had moved on to new stories. Still, every now and then, someone would come up to him, just to say they saw the video and that they were proud of how calm he stayed. Malik didn't know what to say most of the time, so he just nodded and said thanks. Deep down, he wasn't sure if he had been calm or just scared stiff. One afternoon, as he sat under a tree by the basketball court, one of his teachers walked up to him. She had a kind face and often checked in on him since the incident. "You doing okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Yeah, better," she smiled softly. "You handled everything with a lot of grace. You should be proud." Malik looked at her, unsure how to respond. "I just wanted it to be over," he said honestly. "I understand," she said. "But sometimes the things we don't ask for end up teaching others what they need to learn." Her words stayed with him. Maybe she was right. Maybe what happened to him could mean something more than just a bad memory. At home, his mom was busier than ever. Meetings, calls, and community gatherings filled her schedule. She had started working with local leaders to improve police training programs and youth outreach. Malik often heard her on the phone late at night, her voice steady and full of purpose. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, she said, "I've been asked to speak at a town forum next week. They want me to share what happened and talk about what needs to change." Malik put down his fork. "Are you going to?" She nodded. "Yes, I think it's time." He hesitated. "Can I come?" She looked surprised, then smiled warmly. "Of course. I'd like that." The night of the forum, the community center was packed. People from all over the city showed up. Parents, students, police officers, teachers, reporters, and even city officials. Malik sat near the front, his hands resting on his knees, watching as his mom stepped up to the podium. The room went silent when she began to speak. Her voice was calm but full of emotion. She talked about that day, not in a way that blamed or attacked, but in a way that opened hearts. She spoke about fear, about respect, and about what it means to protect and serve everyone equally. Then she said something that made Malik's throat tighten. "My son did everything right that day," she said, her voice steady. "He was polite, calm, and respectful, but that didn't protect him. What protected him was a badge I happened to carry, and that should never be the reason a child feels safe." The room stayed silent for a long moment. Some people looked down. Others nodded slowly. The police chief was there too. He looked thoughtful, almost ashamed. After the speech, people came up to thank her, to shake her hand, to say they wanted to help. Malik stood by quietly, watching. He felt proud, prouder than he'd ever been. When they got home, his mom kicked off her shoes, sat on the couch, and exhaled deeply. "Well," she said, smiling at him, "that's done." He grinned. "You were amazing," she laughed. "You think so?" "I know so," he said. In the days that followed, things began to shift. The police department released a public statement announcing new reforms. Officers would be required to undergo bias and de-escalation training. A community board would review certain cases to ensure fairness. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. One afternoon, Malik got a message on social media from someone he didn't know. It was another teenager from a nearby town. "I saw your story," the message read. "The same thing happened to me last year. I didn't know what to do. But seeing you and your mom fight back, it made me feel like maybe I can too." Malik read the message twice, then smiled. For the first time, he truly understood what his mom had been fighting for. It wasn't just about him. It was about everyone like him who felt unseen, unheard, or powerless. That night, as he helped his mom clean up after dinner, he said quietly, "You were right." She looked up from the sink. "About what?" "Change," he said. "It doesn't happen easy, but it's happening." Her eyes softened. "It is," she said. "And you're part of it," he smiled. "We both are." Weeks turned into months. The story faded from the news, but the changes stayed. The officers involved were reassigned for further training, and new community programs began. Malik's mom even started mentoring younger agents, helping them understand how empathy and service go hand in hand. Malik's life slowly returned to normal, though he was never quite the same. He walked taller, spoke more confidently, and paid more attention to the world around him. He had learned that silence could be dangerous, but that calmness could also be powerful. One morning as they sat having breakfast, a letter arrived in the mail. Angela opened it and read quietly. Then she smiled. "What is it?" Malik asked. She handed it to him. "It's from the department. They're creating a new division for community relations, and they want me to lead it." He looked at her, eyes wide. "That's huge." She laughed softly. "It is. But it's also a lot of work. Still, if it means making a difference, I'm ready." He grinned. "You were born ready." Later that week, she started her new position. Malik went with her to the office on her first day. As they walked through the building, people greeted her with respect. She had become not just an agent, but a voice for change. On the wall near her office was a framed quote that caught Malik's attention. It read, "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the strength to act despite it." He pointed at it and said, "That's you." She smiled. "That's us." As months passed, Malik began volunteering at a youth center. He helped kids with homework and talked to them about staying calm and safe during tough situations. He never told them his whole story, but bits and pieces slipped out now and then. The kids listened closely, eyes wide, soaking in every word. One day, a little boy looked up at him and asked, "Did it scare you?" Malik paused for a moment. "Yeah," he said honestly. "It did, but my mom told me something. Being scared doesn't mean you're weak. It means you care about what happens next." The boy nodded like he understood. Malik smiled. Back at home that night, Angela found him sitting on the porch, staring at the stars. She sat beside him, just like she had on that other night months ago. "Long day?" she asked. He nodded. "Yeah, but a good one." They sat in silence for a while, the sound of crickets filling the night air. Then Malik said softly, "Mom, do you ever wish it didn't happen?" She thought about it for a moment. "Every day," she admitted. "But if it hadn't, maybe we wouldn't be where we are now. Maybe we wouldn't have met the people we've met, or helped the ones we've helped." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I get that." She smiled and looked up at the stars. "You know," she said, "when I joined the Bureau, I thought I understood what justice meant. But this taught me what it really is. It's not just about laws or punishment. It's about dignity. It's about humanity." Malik looked at her, the porch light casting a soft glow over her face. "You sound like a speech again," he teased gently. She laughed. "Maybe I do, but some words are worth saying more than once." He smiled. "Yeah, they are." The wind blew softly, carrying the smell of night air and distant rain. They sat quietly, watching the world around them settle into peace. Inside, the house was filled with small reminders of their journey. Newspaper clippings, framed letters, thank you notes from strangers who had been inspired by their story. But none of that mattered as much as the quiet understanding between them now. Finally, Malik spoke again, his voice soft but certain. "I think I want to do what you do someday." She turned to him, her eyes warm. "You mean law enforcement?" "Yeah, but the good kind. The kind that listens." Her smile grew. "Then you already understand the most important part." As they sat there side by side, the sky cleared and the stars grew brighter. The world outside still had its flaws, but for this moment, everything felt right. And for the first time since that day, Malik didn't think about what had gone wrong. He thought about what could go right from here on out.